All right, guys, we're going to go ahead and get started. For those of you that have been on these webinars, you know me. For those that haven't, my name is Daniel Marks. I'm the manager of prospect information for the Milwaukee Bucks and also the founder of Scouting and Scavenging, an organization that encourages professional and collegiate athletics teams to collect unused hotel toiletries from their travels for donation to organizations in need. Tonight's panel is education and college athletics. Obviously, over the last few months, there have been a lot of discussions around issues of social justice, and education is a key component of that. So the purpose of this webinar was to bring together a diverse group of panelists with diverse experiences in the collegiate athletics realm, from coaches to academic advisors to former athletes, to share their thoughts on many of the issues that are going on in this space today. So each panelist will be asked 3 questions sort of specific to their experiences. And then after each panelist answers the questions, we will have some audience Q&A at the end. So our first guest tonight is Gerald Gurney. He is a professor at the University of Oklahoma in the Department of Educational Leadership and Policy Studies. He's also the author of a 2017 book, Unwinding Madness: What Went Wrong with College Sports and How to Fix It. He's the previous president of the Drake Group for Academic Integrity in Athletics, the N4A, which is a group of collegiate academic advisors. He's a former president of that as well. Served as the senior associate AD at Oklahoma from 1993 to 2011. And prior to Oklahoma, spent time in the athletic departments of Iowa State, Maryland, and SMU. So Professor Gurney, welcome. Happy to have you here. First question for you is, recently there has been a push to eliminate the SAT and the ACT and standardized testing as a means of admission standards at high-level universities, and recently the National Association of Basketball Coaches, led by Tommy Amaker of Harvard and Frank Martin of South Carolina, pushed for this to be eliminated when looking at athletics admissions. As you know, admitting athletes to a school is usually a combination of GPA and standardized test scores, but as you know, not all GPAs are created equal. A 3.0 at an elite prep school in New England versus an underfunded rural or inner city public school is not the same. If the SATs and ACTs are eliminated as requirements for student athletes in admissions, how can colleges assess the academic readiness of their incoming athletes, and what tools outside of those standardized tests would you use in your time in the athletic department?
Thank you for inviting me, Daniel. I have often called college presidents' use of special admissions the original sin of college athletics. It has led to a perfect storm for academic dishonesty, not to mention the varsity blues scandal. I think it is well established that the best single predictor for academic success in college is clearly the grade point average. The problem is that standardized tests are not designed to predict the graduation of college athletes. It's not even designed to predict the graduation of general students. What they are designed to predict is academic success during the first year of college. However, standardized tests are also pretty good assessments of academic skills, the types of academic skills that you need in the classroom. This thereby creates a dilemma. The NCAA is using a tool that isn't designed to measure what they are purporting to measure. The NCAA gives double weight to grade point averages over test scores to develop a complete sliding scale. It is possible for a prospective student athlete to get 0 answers correct on a standardized test and still qualify for a scholarship and eligibility. So the purpose of the NCAA's initial standards is to set the lowest bar possible for eligibility of academically prepared athletes. And the NCAA has shown themselves to be miserable failures at setting standards that began in 1962. Prior to that time, prior to 1962, individual schools set their own admission standards, and if the school said a prospective athlete was eligible, then they were eligible. So the NCAA is setting out to nearly an impossible task. As you may know, audience, there are about 1,200 schools, colleges and universities within the NCAA, and each one has a unique culture. Each of those schools have their own variable of skills and traits to predict success. So if Gerald Gurney were the czar of college sports, and he's not, although I'd like to be, I would say that there is no need whatsoever for NCAA initial eligibility standards. That there is no need to require schools to specially admit students. Universities ought to be able to admit whomever they wish, but they also have a responsibility, a very important responsibility, to work on the necessary academic skills of those athletes who come in ill-prepared for that institution, in order to give that athlete a reasonably good chance of being successful.
Now, you mentioned special admissions. Obviously, there was the scandal a couple of years ago with Felicity Huffman and Lori Loughlin, and paying for their kids to be athletes on the rowing team or the sailing team. And it was a huge fraudulent case. As part of your job as the senior associate AD at Oklahoma, you had to present a case to the university admissions office for these special admits in athletics. Were you ever conflicted making those recommendations, and what type of support did you put in place for those students who weren't necessarily academically ready for Oklahoma?
Well, you're skipping a little ahead of the questions. However, when an athlete came in who was specially admitted, we administered two types of tests. One was a Nelson-Denny reading test, and a second one was the wide range achievement test called the RAT. It was the RAT-4. And they were very good at analyzing academic skills, those two instruments. We also gave all athletes a strong interest inventory to see where they were with respect to reading. But every poorly functioning athlete who was up for special admissions, the coach would present, oh, he's an impact player. He's going to make the difference, or she, for that matter. He or she is going to make the difference between winning and losing. He's the difference maker that will turn around my season. And ironically, most of them never made an impact at all. And I have found over the years that athletes, particularly those with deep skill deficiencies, also have performance problems. I don't know why that is, but it seems to me that they had trouble adjusting to the demands of college life.
Now, one of the other aspects of your work in the athletic department was in the areas of mental health. You created the psychological resources for OU student athletes. In the mid-2000s, the mental health conversation in athletics has really been put to the forefront. You've seen athletes like Kevin Love and DeMar DeRozan and Ben Gordon talk about their struggles with depression, anxiety, and other issues. How can coaches and athletic departments be proactive in dealing with mental health issues as opposed to reactive?
Well, one of the things I noticed at the University of Oklahoma was that there were particular stressors that were unique to athletes, in addition to what the general student body, those students were going through, such as injuries, dealing with injuries that end a season or end a career, the relationship with other team members, the relationship with their coaches, the pressures placed upon them by the general public and their coaches in particular, parental stresses and pressures, society and fan expectations, time demands, academic pressures on top of everything else, and the challenge of maintaining your eligibility. All of these were stressors. So I began to formulate at Oklahoma our own psychological unit called PROS, Psychological Resources for OU Student Athletes. And I began with hiring Nikki Moore, who was a counseling psychologist and who, by the way, coincidentally is now the athletic director at Colgate. I began by hiring Nikki, and that program grew to 3 full-time psychologists plus an internship program. So they were kept very busy, and that area, that complete area of sports psychology, and in particular counseling psychology to improve the mental health of athletes, really blossomed. And one of the things I'm most proud of is my contribution to that aspect of academic support. And I found it was very helpful to not only keeping the athletes' minds on an even par, but also improving their performance in the classroom.
Well, thank you, Professor Gurney, for joining us. Our next guest is Latonya Pinkard. Many of you may know her from Netflix's Last Chance U, seasons 3 and 4, that highlighted Independence Community College's football program. She is an English professor at Independence. She is also a blogger, life coach, motivational speaker, and currently working on a children's book. We're very lucky to have her, and season 5 of Last Chance U just came out yesterday. She will not be featured on it, but make sure to tune in. So Latonya, the first question for you, some of the most poignant moments in Last Chance U were your work with Bobby Bruce, a student who was struggling in the classroom and on the football field and was sort of teetering on the edge of dropping out, going back home to Florida, continuing his career, trying to get a scholarship to a Division I institution. Many of the assignments, that Bobby was given, just kind of writing a paper or doing just a kind of a basic homework assignment, seemed like impossible tasks for him in his mind. When doing the work seems daunting or impossible to a student athlete, how can people in positions like yours make the assignment seem like tasks that are manageable and can be achieved?
First of all, I would like to say again, thank you for having me on this webinar this evening. I think it's very beneficial for us to learn and grow together and help one another out in our educational system. And to answer your question, unfortunately, as an instructor, our reputation precedes us as educators. Most students will hear, this person is hard, this person is, don't accept late work, this person is this person is that. It's important for me to meet a student athlete, what have you, where they are. If I go above them, if I speak above them, I will lose them. If I speak below them, I will seem condescending. So it's extremely important to meet students where they are and grow them from there, to let them know that I'm here with you, you can do the work, I got you. So you just have to be genuine. And when you're genuine, students will know.
And how much more progress can you make with a student athlete in the academic field when that baseline level of care has been established?
I'm sorry, say that one more time.
How much more progress can you make with a student when you establish that relationship and that baseline level of care for them, not just in the classroom, but beyond?
My gosh, when I've established a baseline level where students understand that I am here to coach you through your education, I present it in a tough love manner, because most athletes, they come from a coaching background. And when I'm able to get them to trust me, respect me as an educator, the floodgates will open up. And once the floodgates open up, as I asked on the show, and I always ask my students, are you going to allow me to teach you? Because if you don't allow me in to teach you, there's going to be a block. But once students allow me in to teach, it's miraculous what can happen. And what I have to remind students of, and I heard this a long time ago, I think they forget, especially student athletes, what they forget is when you have to go to practice and you learn a play, when you have to execute that play on a field in front of hundreds of people flawlessly, you can't tell me you cannot understand work in the classroom. You just have to put the work in the classroom to achieve success. Like I said, give me the energy you have on the field, in the classroom, floodgates open up.
Now, on Twitter recently, you've talked and floated the idea of creating a writing workshop for inner city athletes before they go off to college, because a lot of them come from inner city public schools that are underfunded and don't necessarily prepare them for the rigors of a college education. What would a workshop like that look like, and how can people in this industry help turn that idea into a reality?
I don't believe in any student being left behind. So my purpose, my mission, and I'm working within the huddle now to create a virtual tutoring academy where students can get that nudge. So statistics can be broken, so they're ready for college. I want to help students feel more confident in a classroom when they go off to school, because it can be intimidating. It can be daunting. And if you're a student athlete, your schedule is rigorous, on top of having to learn how to write, on top of having to learn how to research. And I want to provide a way, well, again, working within the huddle, we're going to provide a way for students to get that upper hand, to have that confidence in a classroom. And I would love to, at some point, have a charter school. And I would say, how can people help? Sponsorship. Because no child deserves to be left behind in any educational system in the United States of America. That's unacceptable. It's extremely unacceptable. And whatever I can do as an educator to help fix that problem, I will do, period.
Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
So our next guest is Kelly Anderson. She is the Senior Academic Coordinator at Illinois State University, where she works with the men's basketball and volleyball programs. She helped create and develop the Learning Support Program, which measures academic readiness of incoming student athletes. Prior to Illinois State, she worked at Florida State and Southeast Missouri State, which was her alma mater, where she was a Division I volleyball player. Kelly, this is something Professor Gurney touched on in terms of admission standards for athletes, but academic standards, once players are there and the eligibility requirements are pretty low, anywhere from a 1.8 to a 2.0 in order to stay eligible to play on the field. Why does the NCAA have such low expectations in the classroom of their student athletes? And do you think it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy of sorts where players see, okay, all I need to do is get a 1.8 or 2.0 and then I'm good and I can play, as opposed to pushing themselves the way that they would on the field or on the court?
Well, thank you for having me tonight, Daniel. I just want to say that. Thank you for the invitation. And no, I don't really believe that it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. I think there are some students who come to colleges and universities because they are gifted in their sport, which provides them the opportunity to continue on to higher education without truly understanding and knowing what that entails, right? So in my opinion, I think it's unrealistic to set higher expectations when someone isn't fully prepared for the level of higher education. There are often student athletes who are extremely underprepared for college. In addition to having these student athletes take on a full course load, you're also asking them to dedicate a minimum of 20 hours a week to their particular sport. And so they are also in a completely new environment, and some are first-generation college students where there is zero familiarity within the academic expectations. And so when you encounter student athletes who are in this situation, who are not fully equipped as a full-time student for the classroom experience, and then you're asking them to commit fully to their sport, it might be hard for them to understand what balance is, what the balance looks like, how do I dedicate myself to academics? And so, in my opinion, I think it's fair to say that student athletes who are on full scholarships, which are contingent on what they can produce and provide for their team, it influences their priorities, right? So it's not that they don't try hard academically, it's just that they may not understand the work and the dedication that is necessary to succeed off the court and to see the bigger picture. So while the expectations the NCAA set seem low, it is ultimately, it allows for a greater success for a broader range of student athletes.
And that kind of leads into the next question. Ultimately, at the end of the day, you can't care more about a student's success than they can. If a student doesn't see the value in academics or working hard on the basketball court, you can't want it more for someone than they want it for themselves. So when you encounter students who you feel like you want success more for them than they want it for themselves, how do you combat that? How can you make someone see that bigger picture of what opportunity they have to get a college education and degree?
So in my experience, my students are not usually applauded for their academic success prior to coming to Illinois State, but they're always applauded for their athletic accomplishments. So you may say that there are students who do not value their education. However, this lack of focus and praise of academics, even in the celebration of the small successes, develops academic insecurities. And so that can be translated to, I don't care about my education type of attitude. And so what I've tried to do with my students is create a safe environment where it is okay that they are not the best in the classroom. It's okay that they're not the best yet in their classroom. And so, but it is not okay that they don't show up, and it is not okay that they don't try. And I have to remember that some of my students are used to being great at their sport, usually the best on their teams. However, when they're faced with academics, something they may not be great at or good at, it can hurt their pride. It hurts their image of being this almighty on a pedestal type of athlete. And so they may be afraid to try and fail and be deemed a failure. And so again, it may be easier to mask their lack of education with, well, I just don't care. And so there was a time where these athletes that come in that are underprepared, there may be a time where they weren't good or were the best at their sport, but they practiced, they sought help from coaches, they watched film, they self-critiqued. Yet most of our students have never done that in correlation to their academics. And so, for example, if I have a student that gets a 60% on an exam, I ask them to reflect on what they did to earn that 60%. Did you only study for an hour? Did you take good notes? We talk through that, okay? And then we sit there and make goals. Well, what do you want on your next exam? You want a 70%? What do you think you need to do to obtain that 70%? You need to study for 3 hours and take better notes? Okay. And based off of what they say, we create a realistic plan moving forward. So I put the academics in their hands and I give them that power. And so in addition to creating that safe space, I also try to establish relationships early on. As this relationship develops, I try to find out what motivates them, their insecurities, how I can assist them individually. And that all ties into helping create that plan. And in my experience, it's no easy task to make someone care. There are times when I do care more than them. And it's really hard when you see their potential, you know it's there, and they don't see it themselves. They don't have the confidence to see it themselves. Therefore, being more consistent for them, being their cheerleader in the corner, but also having those constant real conversations about the reality of their academic situation, how it impacts their athletic opportunities, which also affects their lives moving forward, is very significant. Being genuine, being real with them, because they appreciate that. They want to know the truth. Holding them accountable to their word, to their actions, calling them out when necessary. Treating them as adults with respect is how we develop those real relationships. And so after all, they're really not going to care what I have to say until they realize how much I care for them as people. And so at the end of the day, it's their lives, not mine, and I can only do so much as a support staff. The rest is on them to see the opportunity, see the help, and take advantage of it.
Now, part of your job as an academic advisor is kind of scheduling out their semester, study hall times, classes, a calendar of due dates, stuff like that. How do you balance making sure an athlete has the resources and support needed to succeed while not becoming a crutch for them, where they don't learn independent skills, and when they go out into the real world or become professional athletes and they're on their own, they don't know what to do because they've been, used to people in high school or people in college always doing things for them?
Absolutely. My goal is to help develop my student athletes to become independent students. But before I can do that, sometimes I first have to teach them what a student looks like. And so I have to teach them the team expectations, study hall expectations, general time management, general organizational skills, so that once those become habits, they start to see the gains that are made and start to trust the process and understand that these steps and these expectations that are met, it can make you a successful student. Also, creating familiarity with the resources available to them, such as tutoring, professor office hours, creating an environment where I normalize that. It's normal to get tutors. If you are struggling, let's get you a tutor. Everyone gets tutors. That's normal. You need to go speak with the professor. We're going to have you schedule that, get face-to-face with professors, and that's normal. And that only reinforces that independent learning down the line. And once they have an understanding of their daily habits and how it produces results, that's when they become empowered, asking them questions like, well, what do you think you should do next? Instead of telling them what they should do next, empowers them to be in control, to make those decisions about their own academics, sometimes with guidance from me, but especially early on in their career where they need that guidance. I think that's okay. And this is where they develop those necessary skills to be successful on their own. So ultimately, my goal is to get them out of study hall. My goal is to take my thumb off of them, to pull the reins back, and to allow them to create their own academic plans, to check in with me occasionally when need to. But I would love to just see them, to watch them grow, succeed, sometimes stumble with an arm's length away, and just always be close enough to answer questions, to assist them, help them, collaborate when necessary.
Thanks so much for joining us, Kelly.
Thank you, Daniel.
Our next guest is Kim English. Kim is entering his second season at the University of Tennessee as an assistant coach. Spent 2 years prior to that at the University of Colorado, and before that at Tulsa, working for his college head coach, Frank Haith. He was recognized this past year on the ESPN 40 Under 40 Rising Coaches rankings. Prior to coaching, Kim had a 3-year professional career spanning the NBA, Italy, France, and Venezuela after a standout career at the University of Missouri, where he was part of the winningest senior class in school history. Kim, thanks for joining us. My first question for you, having played in the NBA, you see a lot of college coaches in recruiting tout their ability to get players to the NBA. There's a difference between getting to the NBA and sticking in the NBA. How can college coaches better prepare their student athletes to have a long-term and longevity in their career in the NBA as opposed to just getting there? And how do you see them doing that now that the G League has sort of put a program in place designed to do this for high-level prospects?
Yeah, I don't think the G League thing affects us in the slightest. I mean, I think it's a mistake for certain prospects because of the level of protection that is college basketball. I mean, if you go to that program and your body fat is too much, that G League program has no interest in protecting that information. If you enter that program with some immaturity or bad things about your game or personality, those people that are thirsting for jobs in the NBA have no reason to protect that information. So I think there's a big risk in doing that as opposed to coming to college. But to answer your question, I think it starts in the recruiting process. You know, I ask kids plainly, what is your dream? And they'll say to get to the NBA, and I'll tell them in front of their parents, whoever, that's the wrong dream. Because it was my dream. It was my dream to get to the NBA, and I was absolutely obsessed about it. You know, I was locked in college. I didn't do certain things because I was just so focused on getting to the NBA. And I got there, and I was drafted, and I signed a deal, and I learned too late that it was the wrong dream. The dream is to stick. The dream is to have multiple contracts, to play 10, 15 years. And it's about more than just letting them know that. I think it's about making them realize that early, making it a fearful thing quickly. Now, I tell our guys all the time, like, you want to be me? You want to be me? You want to play 1 year in the league and be done? And they're like, no. So now it's about teaching them the things that NBA decision makers value, that NBA coaches value in making your way into a long career. And it's wanting it all. It's coming to the gym early. It's staying late. It's being coachable. It's being a great teammate. It's wanting more film. It's being dedicated to perfecting your craft so that the bottom line is you are going to have optimal performance more times than not, and an immense amount of professionalism. So if it's us being early to the bus, if it's being early to the practice court and having a lather, it's the way you handle yourself in post-game media. It's the way you handle yourself to your academic advisors, coaches, video people, because NBA personnel like yourself are going to find out the truth by speaking to all those people. So it's the holistic approach to knowing that and making them realize that getting to the NBA, I say, is very easy. I think it's very easy if you're good enough. Staying there is what's difficult.
Now, you know, for those of you that are unfamiliar with the movie Finding Forrester, it's one of my all-time favorite sports movies, and it centers around an athlete, Jamal Wallace, in New York City, who gets a basketball scholarship to a predominantly white elite prep school. And he is a brilliant student and writer and deals with a highly skeptical English teacher who thinks that the writing Jamal is producing is in no way his own. Was it a two-part question? Was it ever a struggle for you to be recognized for your accomplishments in the classroom because of your status as a high-level athlete? And why do you think there's skepticism when an athlete is a high achiever of that it's, you know, they're doing it themselves or that?
Well, I think if we just would translate that to college, if it is Stanford, if it's Harvard, if it's Princeton, I don't think those athletes deal with that. I think because it's just an assumed status or level that they are. But, you know, being real, it would be a black thing. And it's something that, you know, as a black man, especially, you learn how to deal with. Sitting next to people on an airplane, and maybe I have my hood up and they may be apprehensive at first, but when conversation starts, they're disarmed because of, I don't know, education or being able to articulate, enunciate, whatever it is. And again, I'm ashamed of it. It's why I wanted to come on this and be here with you. I'm embarrassed at the lack of care I had about my education from high school to college. I'm embarrassed about it. Like I lose sleep about it. I cringe about it. I talk to our guys all the time. I had no care about schooling, but I did enjoy class. I did enjoy learning about American history or sociology of the family or women's studies or Black studies, things that interest me, I was all in on. So I didn't have that, your example with, Jamal in the movie, because in class during lecture, I was really engaged. I was all about the debate and the dialogue in class. It was out of class where I really didn't care about the homework or test. I just did what I had to do to get by. And that's a regret of mine. Now, if I could do it all over again, I would have been so locked in high school. I would have been competitive about getting all A's because I could have. I would have 100% went to an Ivy League or an HBCU, because now, looking back on life, and I'm, where I want to be in my career, but man, I feel so unaccomplished. My senior year, the New Jersey Nets had a combine in Jersey, and I think it was their first year, the Brooklyn Nets. And at that combine was two players. One's name was Zach Rosen, who went to the University of Pennsylvania, and another one name was Josh Owens, who went to Stanford. And they were saying, man, you guys played on Big Monday, ESPN, and you had College Game Day. How was College Game Day versus Kansas? I'm like, what? Zach, you graduated from the Wharton School. Like, Josh, you went to Stanford. Like, I would trade that. I would love to have a degree from Howard University right now. And, and this kind of came about looking at the HBCU thing, but just looking what John Lewis did with his life at 23, organizing the March on Washington. Like, I just feel so unaccomplished. And I try to pass that on to our athletes now. Want it all. Take this free education and go into medicine. Go be a lawyer. Go to office hours. Like, use this opportunity. And especially with my Black student athletes, I educate them on why it's so important. Why it's so important from a moral standpoint of what our ancestors had to go through and die and murdered and tortured for the opportunity to get an education, to deeper levels of the systemic racism in higher education in the United States of America, in the South, where I am. And then furthermore, because I just always challenge them thinking beyond basketball. I don't care if you have a great NBA career, a great one. Vince Carter, a great one. All right, he's 42. He has 40 more years on earth, right? So now what? So that's kind of where I am with it.
Now, you mentioned kind of passing this knowledge on to your student athletes. One thing about you that I've always respected, and we've known each other for a number of years, is your vocal presence on social media and speaking out on issues that you care about and are passionate about. But as you know, social media can kind of become a cesspool of ignorance, racism, other topics. There's just a lot of ignorance and uneducated people on these platforms. How do you help your players find their voice and be able to use their platforms as athletes while also making sure that when they speak out, they're educated about the issues they're talking about?
Yeah, that's it. It is a cesspool of ignorance and racism. And I just choose not to deal in those things. I don't engage with trolls or racist or ignorant or sexist or homophobic people at all on the platform. But if I do see something that deserves attention, that does need a voice, that does need, to be spoken into power, I will. And that is solely based on education. I don't speak about what I don't know about. If I don't know about it, I'll try to gain information about it. And again, I have to be really moved to say something. Adrian Wojnarowski had a tweet or an email that was less than flattering to a senator from a state which I hold residence in Missouri. So I didn't mind that Woj. It wasn't the best thing to do, but he said what he said, and I mean the senator is a hypocrite for a lot of other reasons. But to our players, I tell them plainly. I mean, you need to be educated on a topic if you decide to speak up about it. And if you are educated, and if you do have conviction or passion on a topic, man, I'm giving you the freedom. We're giving you the freedom to say whatever you want, because what are our grandchildren going to say? What's history going to say? They talk about protesters in the streets or whatever. This country was founded on a protest. Revolutionists were protesters. Abolitionists were protesters. Women's suffrage, civil rights, so on and so on. And I always think about Muhammad Ali's funeral, right? Muhammad Ali in his heyday was hated. He had a low approval rating. He was deemed a traitor, went against his country, went against the war, and now he's revered. And there are other people so I just always think about, how are you going to be remembered? What are you going to tell your grandkids how you stood about a certain topic? Who did you vote for in a certain election? I think that matters. I think history will remember, and I think the noble ones of us will be rewarded.
Thanks a lot for joining us, Kim, and for those insights. Our next guest is Mitch Henderson. He's entering his 10th season as the Franklin C. Capone Edward C. Green head coach at his alma mater, Princeton University. When you coach at a place like Princeton, Kim, you get you're not just the head coach, but you're the Franklin C. Capone Edward C. Green head coach. He's the third winningest coach in school history, led the Tigers to a 2017 NCAA tournament berth, and an undefeated regular season Ivy League that year, and was the Ivy League Coach of the Year. Prior to that, was a 11-year assistant at Northwestern University, led Princeton to the NCAA tournament in 3 of his 4 seasons as a player, and is active in Coaches vs. Cancer. And Coach and I have been volunteering weekly each Wednesday in Newark, putting together food deliveries for underserved residents in the state. So, Coach, thanks for joining us. First question for you, and this is something Kim really touched on. When someone obtains a Princeton degree, that has the ability not only to change the course of their life, but the lives of their family for generations. Like, when you're recruiting a player, how do you identify players that not only help you on the court, but understand the magnitude of the opportunity that you can provide at Princeton University for those 4 years? Oh, yeah. Let me unmute. Sorry, Coach.
All right. Hey, I'm not the only one that doesn't know how to Zoom. First, thank you, Daniel. Second, I really appreciate being a part of this. Kim, man, every day I look for somebody just like you in our country to come to a place like Princeton. So I want to say that, first of all, I appreciate hearing what you have to say. And I agree that, it's a constant challenge to even for our guys. And I understand that, the student athletes that choose a place like Princeton, it sounds like they've got it all figured out. But even here, they're navigating a world where they feel uncomfortable, and giving them that confidence academically, I think, is a part of our goals as coaches. So I'm so glad to hear you say that with your own players, and you were a hell of a player. But I appreciate the question, Daniel, and basically, what I thought maybe normally I would do it one way, but if I could talk about what it's like on Zoom, because I put a lot of emphasis on getting to know families in person and meeting kids in person. And sort of what does that path look like for a student athlete? Much like as Kim was saying, you talk to everybody. I love to bump into the janitor in the hallways at the high school, go into the guidance office. Our admissions director can read a transcript the same way that we like to look at players. And as Gerald was saying earlier, I think that you can find out an awful lot about somebody's long-term potential academically by looking at the transcript, but then just having the conversation with them. So I think that there is a great responsibility for all of us that are coaches to take students from point A to point B. But for me, that starts with the current players. So it's this continuing process of identifying the right kind of kids that you want to have on the campus visit, and then to take those kids away from me in the recruiting process and then make them a part of the family. So I try to lean really heavily on the current guys. That's been a little bit more difficult in Zoom, but, sort of bringing them in as much as we've been allowed to have conversations and allowing our current student athletes to lead in terms of how we do things. And I think that Daniel, helps them over time be the right fit and person. We also talk a lot in our program about listening to each other and respecting each other. And I think while it's not the same, you can't see the crinkles in somebody's eyes when they're smiling. I have a little more crinkles than everybody else, but you can figure out a little bit of what somebody's about on a Zoom call by allowing the current student athletes to take over.
Now, a follow-up to that, you mentioned in an interview actually on the Greg Horrenda show last week that when you were working out for teams, you got interviewed by the Utah Jazz, and they asked you a question, essentially like, do you want to make the league? Will you do everything it can to make the league? And the implication was that because you went to Princeton, you weren't all in on your basketball career. And through my work, I've seen that, where players have, whether it's musical interests or political interests, it's always a question like, do you really love the game? Why do you think it's hard for people to see that being a high achiever academically and a high achiever athletically are not mutually exclusive pursuits? And do you ever get negatively recruited against from coaches who say, oh, if you go to Princeton, you're not going to be the professional basketball player that you'd be if you come here?
Oh, sure. All the time. And I usually, if that comes up in a recruiting conversation, I almost always say like, that's great. I'm glad that you've heard that somewhere else, but I can't talk about their school because I don't work there, but this is what we do here. And I thought it was totally, at the time, I thought it was a terrible question, but it's totally legitimate question that I was asked when I was 22, and a fair one, and a question that I would ask too. And I think that in order to make it at the highest levels, which I did not, you have to have a singular focus. But I also would, again, point out something that Kim talked about is you need to have the understanding of longevity. And I think that if you look at some of the current professional athletes just in the NBA, especially in the NBA, there's a presence that they have both on and off the court, which is what I think is largely needed right now. In particular, I'm so excited for this Thursday to start to hear our voices being LeBron, Kawhi, Chris Paul speaking out about Black Lives Matter, about Patty Mills' recent initiative to donate a large part of his salary to organizations in instances where he feels important. The WNBA right now speaking about larger than life than what we are doing right now, things that matter on a larger scale. I think that Princeton and what I always challenge our guys is, yes, you should be great at all of it. And if I could we graduated a senior this year who's pre-med, and after his sophomore year, I was like, if you could describe this was after his sophomore year, I said, what would you say is the most important thing to you? And he thought about it for a second, and he was like, school, family, med school, and then the last one was basketball. And I was like, correct, right? And I said, when you're a doctor and you're come sit next to somebody and you're at their bedside table, if the only thing that you're good at is medicine, you're going to be a pretty terrible doctor. You're going to have to come up with some way to talk to that person or to relate to that person, make them feel comfortable. So why not be good at basketball? And he was one of those kids that kind of said, good point. And I think, so the answer to your question is no, it is not mutually exclusive ever, right? And I would never sell any of the guys short on reaching their goals, whatever those goals may be.
Yeah, and I just wanted to touch on something that you and Kim have both said. I mean, this is my 7th season working in the NBA, and often the players that stick, that the superstars are irreplaceable. But you could, and Kim knows this, and you played overseas for a year or two, and the people, the top players in Europe, the top players in college versus the bottom, 150 guys in the NBA, those are pretty interchangeable from a talent standpoint. But what separates those guys at the bottom is how hard do they work? Are they no maintenance? Do they volunteer for the community appearances? I mean, we had a rookie one year who was a first-round draft pick, and he only lasted 3 years in the league. And in his rookie season was paying 3 different leases on apartments because he didn't know how to read an apartment lease and had pet problems in his first 2. And it's, stuff like that you just don't deal with. So I did want to add that point because you and Kim have both touched on it. And, one thing Ivy League schools have that's unique is, your student athletes are not allowed on campus during the summer. There's no summer school, no summer workouts. How beneficial is it for your players to be able to use that time to gain real world job and internship experience? Because I think that's something that a lot of student athletes, even ones that aren't professionals, don't have a professional path necessarily, miss out on because they're in college and they're not getting those opportunities that other students get. So, I mean, and then how do you as a program and university help facilitate those opportunities for your athletes?
Well, again, in a normal setting, I would answer it one way, but I think maybe for the interest of the group, and I'm happy to talk about it, what we normally do, I talk about it this way. So I want what Kim and Jamion have right now. I want to see my guys. We've canceled fall sports. Our campus will be half full in the fall. So I'll have half of my team. My favorite part about coaching is the relationship with the current guys and to be around them. It is possible if we don't play, I will see, I have a couple international guys that are struggling to get into the country. We do talk, Daniel, a lot about our guys because we don't have summer access, about summer jobs, summer internships. Princeton has a very robust international abroad program where we really push our guys to go. The player you just mentioned was in Madagascar last summer studying leeches as part of his undergraduate medical work. But I miss being around the team, so there's a point to that. But at the same time, they're kids. They're 18 to 22-year-old kids, and I do think that being around each other, having the camaraderie, is also a large part of the growth process. And not that I'm special by any means, but I really enjoy that piece of it. And that half an hour before and after practice, getting some time with them, that's my favorite part.
Coach, thanks for joining us. We have another head coach. This one is not an endowed position at George Washington yet, but maybe we'll have a sponsor for that by the end of the call. Jamion Christian will be entering his 2nd season this fall at George Washington University. Prior to his time at GW, he spent 1 season as the head coach at Siena University after 6 years at his alma mater, Mount St. Mary's. He was the Ben Jobe 2017 Coach of the Year and the Jim Phelan Coach of the Year in 2017 as well. 2 NCAA tournament berths at Mount St. Mary's. Assistant coach at VCU, William and Mary, and Bucknell. He's also the founder of the 360-Degree Symposium, which on July 1st brought together 36 speakers, primarily people of color from across the college athletic spectrum, for 7 panels to discuss a wide range of issues, as well as provide a networking and mentoring opportunity for aspiring coaches. Coach, thanks for joining us. First question for you. A major topic of debate in this field is the clustering of athletes into specific majors. Sometimes you go to a team website and, you know, half of the football team is majoring in the same thing. You guys at GW don't have a football team, so that's not an issue there. But what are the root causes behind clustering in your opinion? And what's the process like when you and your staff help players decide what their majors are going to be?
Yeah, first of all, thanks for having me on. Just really appreciative to share this platform with everyone here. I've learned a ton. I've taken a ton of notes down, so I'm really appreciative of having us on. I think it's interesting with clustering. I think number one, it's really important for us to own our environment and to really understand what our why is. And for me, my parents are both teachers, so I have an academic background. The conversation we had at the dinner table were all driven about student success. My mom was a special education teacher for 35 plus years. So just listening to the amount of patience she would have every day with her students. And just, I think one of the things that I have from my background with my family is just recognizing how every student is so different. And so everything that we've always tried to do wherever I've been is just try to really get to know the student and understand the importance of it, what it is for them. Clustering is scary to me. I'll tell you, there's a lot of transfers that go on now. And when I get a chance to come across a kid who's been in that cluster, it's just disappointing. As educators, we have an obligation to try to push every one of these students as far along as possible. You think about this. You look at these you look at a child as a generational changer potentially, and you have a guy. He's 6'5", 6'6". His parents might be 5'8". His dad might be 5'8". His mom might be 5'6". And he's got a chance to go on to college, have a college scholarship, and leave there with no debt, an opportunity to change his life. I think we have an obligation to that family to help them along generationally. For that player, it's huge that he gets a college degree, that he understands the importance of that college degree and what that does for his son and daughter coming on after them. And I just think in a lot of ways in the college setting, we failed our athletes because we haven't had the toughest conversations with them about the importance of education and what it does, not just for them, but it's bigger than them. My parents being college graduates give me the opportunity to want to be college graduates, and so on and so forth with our family moving forward. So you have an opportunity to change your generation. So when I see the clustering, it's one of the most disappointing things ever. And we had a kid who transferred in here, and he was a high academic kid, and he went to a place and was just put into a cluster and wasn't challenged. And, watching his performance there academically from what he was capable of, and then watching him here, it's just been night and day. And I think all of us need to be in a situation where we're constantly being challenged and constantly pushed outside of our comfort zone to be at our very best. And I want to see more people. I want to see more coaches. I want to see more administrators do that. And Kelly, she works with students that are high academics, she works with students that are trying to figure it out. But you can tell by her level of passion that she has for her students that no matter where you fall on that line, she's trying to do everything she can on a day-to-day basis to care and to help push them forward. I think our business is lined with people that have that kind of heart and that kind of caring, but they need coaches, they need administrators all along the way to help give them more energy to understand the importance of that, because our relationship with them is different. And, that's one thing we've always tried to do. When you look at our roster, we have guys taking every kind of major possible. And I think that's huge. I want every one of these guys to be successful on the floor and off the floor. And we're just trying to create an environment where they have the opportunity to do that and where they're pushed to constantly be in the state of pushing themselves forward to really challenge themselves.
Now, oftentimes on campus, and I was a student manager at Vanderbilt, and I saw this myself firsthand, athletes tend to self-segregate from the rest of the student body, just different schedules, sometimes different dorms, different dining halls. Your university, located in the heart of Washington, D.C., so not only do your athletes have great opportunities on campus, but some of the world's leading political, media, historical institutions within walking distance. How do you encourage your players to take advantage of the unique learning opportunities they have outside of the classroom and outside of the study hall and go beyond kind of their natural comfort zone?
We spend a lot of our time trying to build this environment in. And for me, I think everything's about environment. the environment that we create, they will live up to that standard of being on a day-to-day basis. And so what we try to do here is we just encourage them to be a part of the community. You know, it's not uncommon for us to start practice an hour later for them to go to a presentation if it's someone that we think really that they really need to hear. You know, in our group chats, you know, we're not just talking about who's better, Kobe or Jordan. We're sitting around movies that people should be watching. We actually have a leadership enhancement program that I lead and that our staff leads that we do with these guys. You know, it's 15 to 20 different leadership seminars that we do with these guys throughout the course of the year. I just think if our relationship with our players is only about their ability to play, we're kind of missing the mark. Our commonality is our ability to play the game and our ability to want to compete and coach it. The thing that's going to separate all of us is our ability to help them learn how to connect with people off the floor. So we're spending a ton of time trying to do that. And, you know, that's why I love being at GW, because it's a place where, you know, we have Bernie Sanders just walking through campus one day. We have, you know, Dikembe Mutombo walking through campus one day. You know, President Trump's house, the White House, is only three blocks away. So we have that here on campus. So we just try to spend time encouraging them to go out and do those things and almost giving out homework assignments to come back. You know, when they have great speakers on campus, we encourage them to go see it. And then, you know, they have to come back and do a report in front of the team. And I think those things are huge just to show the guys that it's acceptable. And again, I think when you create that kind of environment, they're going to live up to that standard over and over again. But when we're constantly making our environments only about winning and losing, when we're not making our environments about helping them understand their role that they play in society, when we're not helping them understand the role they play within their family dynamics, I think we're failing our student athletes when we do that. And again, that's why we're spending so much more of our time just locking in with our players on non-basketball stuff. We'll be fine when we get to the floor. You know, we've always found a way to win more games than we lose just about every year. So it's not really about that. But I just want our relationship with the world, I want our relationship with our university to be so much bigger than what these guys are doing on the floor. It's great to be at a place like GW where it's so easily accessible for them to meet some of the world's best and where they can be a part of what the world's doing and have a great understanding of it.
Now, COVID has obviously had a devastating impact in a lot of different ways in this country, economically, the death toll. Well, one thing, though, that's been encouraging for me is oftentimes in this profession of professional or collegiate sports, it's so competitive and it's so cutthroat that the kind of bringing together of this community of coaches and administrators and executives to, you know, further causes of social justice. You know, the WNBA, the NBA, you know, and the college level, the McClendon initiative that was launched recently in your 360 mentoring program. Have you found sort of a greater sense of cooperation amongst yourself in the college coaching community now than you've seen in the past? And then can you discuss kind of the impetus behind the 360 mentoring program and what that day was like for you this year?
Yeah, I mean, number one, I think what I want to see is I want to see us continue to build towards just having a better awareness for people in all our communities. And, you know, right now it's sort of fashionable to speak out on these social matters. And so what I really want to make sure that we do is that we keep them on the forefront. And there's so many issues that we have. I mean, it's not just Black Lives Matter. It's, you know, it's how we treat our women in the workplace. It's how we treat minorities in the workplace. It's how we treat each other on a day-to-day basis. So there's a lot of things that I think as a human, I just want to see the world be better at. And that's what I'm really passionate about. And, you know, part of the 360 mentoring group for us was just trying to bring some of the best people in the country into some of the best people in the athletic world and the university world into one place. You know, so many times we have these amazing people that can help us, that can lead us, that can guide us, and we don't get a chance to meet them. You know, I mean, you look at the number of college presidents, you look at the number of college vice presidents, the number of Black provosts in the country, you look at the number of Black head coaches in the country. And when you look at these numbers, it's staggering that we haven't been able to break into those worlds. And those worlds allow for things to really change. And so until you're able to break into those worlds, it's going to be hard for consistent change to happen. You know, like right now, you know, on college campuses, it's like a battle between social injustice and COVID, as everyone's trying to figure out COVID in the immediate, and understanding social injustice is happening now, but the changes will take a long time for them to happen. So everyone's kind of battling these situations right now on campus. And so just trying to be out on the forefront of being there for people to be able to communicate and talk and not being afraid to step up and speak up, because we have the opportunity right now. We have the platform. And I think as a Black head coach, I have a responsibility to guys like Kim English. to speak up so that the world is different for him, that he gets an opportunity that he's well deserving of. And that's what we've just been trying to do, and just trying to consistently speak out about it. And that's what 360 mentoring was about. It was about really putting guys and women of power and women of color on the forefront, so people could really connect with them and see the changes that they're working to create. It was an amazing day, 36 speakers over 12 hours. I don't know if anyone had ever tried to do that before, and we're going to consistently try to do that every single year to make sure we keep the biggest issues on the forefront and that we don't back off of it. And, I'm appreciative of all the platforms that we've been able to be on, but, when we get back to the workplace, it's going to be important that everybody consistently tries to battle for these things and understands the injustices that are all around us. It's been amazing watching the WNBA. It's been amazing watching the NBA, really come out and speak about it. The NFL, the players have been amazing with that. But again, it's fashionable right now. So it's easy right now. A year from now, 2 years from now, it's going to be a little bit harder. And I think we've got to really make sure that we're doing everything we can to battle for equal rights for everybody.
Thanks a lot, Coach. Appreciate that. So now we'll give it a chance for guys in the audience to ask some questions. I'm going to open up the chat. If you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. And then I'll ask it to the person that I believe is best suited to answer. So wait a few 30 seconds if you guys want to put your questions in there. First question, Coach Henderson. What's your perspective on Ivy League schools not requiring ACT, SAT scores for students except for athletes? Oh.
There we go. Yeah, that's a great question, and I was taking notes during Gerald's talk about what ways in which we can have productive conversations here on our campus. Obviously, for regular students, the SAT and the ACT has been no longer required, but for athletes, it still is. This is an ongoing conversation on all of our campuses in the league. I tend to agree with Gerald, and I believe that on each campus, and let me just say what I believe is, I'm a basketball coach, so I'm not the admissions director, nor do I make those decisions, but I do believe that you can find out an awful lot about someone's based on their academic info on the transcript. So I'm hopeful that we continue to make progress. Of course, you mentioned Tommy Amaker and now Craig Robinson being on the NABC committee. So, they've released that statement earlier this week. So I'm hopeful that we continue to make progress there too.
Thanks, Coach. I'll direct this one to Kelly and to Kim. So this question, Kim, if you want to start out, speak about the importance of community in determining student athlete success.
No, I think it's important. I don't know where that community starts. It starts at home. Hopefully there's a infrastructure in place for that kid to have a strong background like Coach Christian, parents and education. That's not always the case. I think it is very important. And I think that I wrote down something you said, Daniel, and not to pick at you, but you said, you said athletes self-segregate. And I don't know what it's like at, Harvard or Princeton, what those rowing athletes do. Does the rowing and crew team integrate with the general population? I'd say maybe, I don't know. But in my mind, I pictured high major. You went to school in the SEC. I imagine you saying like basketball and football players didn't integrate with regular students. I'm on our diversity, equity, and inclusion committee here at the University of Tennessee. And see, I think that is a community problem. I think that athletes, and especially Black athletes, do self-segregate themselves because they are yearning to be around people that look like them. And so in every class in my college career, I was one of 100 or two of 150. So my charge to our admissions department is, what are you doing to actively recruit non-student athletes from Nashville, Memphis, Atlanta, Charlotte, Cincinnati, all places within a respectable radius of Knoxville, Tennessee? So I think that, sure, athletes self-segregate, but I think it's a reason why. And I think, why are there no Black sororities or fraternities have houses on campus? I'd like to know. So, like, I think that as a community, as a university, as an establishment, we have an opportunity to integrate a little bit better. And just one more point to add to Coach Christian hit it on the head about this being the hot thing right now, and the social justice thing. And it's a quote from Malcolm X, and I said it to our chancellor, and she kind of shot back a little bit, but it was great. Malcolm X said, white men will try to satisfy us with symbolic victories before they offer up economic equality or justice. So what Coach said, keep the main thing the main thing. Like, let's not just accept Black Lives Matter Plaza on Pennsylvania Avenue or wherever it is in DC. Like, let's make actual real change. So I don't know if that answered the question. But.
No, and I to piggyback on what you said, Kim, at a place like Vanderbilt, it's an SEC school, and there's inherent, Vanderbilt doesn't have athlete dorms the way that some other high majors would, so that helped kind of integrate the student body. But I've talked to players who only take online. I think online classes right now are becoming a popular. Obviously with COVID, that's changed things. But before that, there was this tendency at certain universities to put students in online courses so that they could pursue the NFL draft or the NBA draft, and they don't get those student-to-student interactions outside of the team setting that are so important for growing and building relationships. Because you can, as Kim and Coach, you could be with a student and you make a friendship, and that guy becomes an executive at Goldman Sachs, and then you are able to connect with them when you're an athlete, and maybe you build that platform. So Kelly, this was a question also designated for you, but how do you build that academic community for your players on campus?
So when I think of a community for an athlete, for a student athlete, I think of the coaching staff. I think of the entire support staff. And so I'm picturing the athletic trainer, the strength coach, myself, nutritionist, head coach, and the assistant coach. In addition to that, the professors that see these students every day. And so I think it's important that we all have the same message, and we all vocalize that often to our students. This isn't, your sport isn't the end all be all. However, you are here to play your sport, but you're also here to do well and succeed academically. And so I think that if coaches do a good job of backing my message, then we have that strong community where coaches are constantly asking, how did you do on that exam? How did you do on that paper? Kelly told me you did great. I'm going to talk about it in front of everyone in practice. And you have that one message. I think that is the community that is important to student athletes, on top of also, what you see out in the community, out in the campus, what to reiterate what Kim was saying. So I think there's different forms of community, and one that I immediately thought of was the coaching staff and the support staff and the support that they give our students.
Yeah. This is a great question from Corey Schmidt. I'm going to give it to Gerald and Latonya. Gerald, you first. Coaches, you often hear the line that they coach their best players the hardest. What equivalent do you think there is to that in the classroom? because there often seems to be a disproportionate amount of time spent on the students that struggle in class as opposed to the students that maybe are more self-sufficient in the classroom.
Oh, that's very true. I spent about 10% of my time with our best students and 90% of my time with our absolute worst students. I think everyone is ignoring sort of an elephant in the room, and that is, and I said it earlier, the original sin of special admissions. We have, in order to keep athletes eligible, we have created a cottage industry of academic advisors, of tutors, of learning specialists. We surround them with psychologists and this huge number of academic support staff. And why are we having all of these individuals giving athletes an isolated environment of academic support when in fact they should be utilizing the university services? If the university wants these athletes to thrive, they ought to pony up for providing the academic support that they need. And Kelly, you ought not to be working for the athletic department. You ought to be working for the dean of students or the provost. My point being, academic support has no business being in an athletic program. And this is coming from someone who directed 4 different Division I programs. I strongly believe that. I think that the Princeton probably has a different model for academic support. I can tell you that being an athlete, being a student at the University of Oklahoma is very, very different than Princeton. So that's what I want. That's what I've been quiet about for about an hour that I've been wanting to say.
Latonya, what's your thought on that question?
You know, I've spent more time with student athletes than I have regular students. When I taught in Georgia at the community college level, I thought, you know, when certain students came in with certain deficiencies, I thought, okay, well, maybe this is just regional. Okay, I can work with that. But when I went to Independence, Kansas and taught there, I realized this is across the nation. There is a problem within our educational system, especially when it comes to athletes. I don't get it. I don't understand it. There's a huge problem. I would spend, like Dr. Gurney said, I would spend more time with my student athletes catching them up from sentence development to grammar and moving forward from there. Not only catching them up, but teaching them about accountability, teaching them about being responsible as a student, because I'm not going to enable you. It's up to you to do the work that I give you. And what was strange for me, or kind of upsetting, when I had a class that were not athletes, and they went to normal schools, teaching those students versus teaching that class of athletes versus, / underrepresented was like teaching night and day. I didn't have to go over grammar. I didn't have to go over some of the mechanics of writing. And that's a problem. And we could tell that there is a breakdown in the system, which is again why I'm trying to do tutoring, to give this nudge up for a lot of students who lack. There are a lot of teachers who say they're teaching, and there may be a lot of learning going on, but when you step foot in my classroom, I always have to ask, where did you go to school and what did you learn? Because I shouldn't have to go over how to write a thesis statement. I don't mind doing it, because that's what you need help in, and that's my job to help you, and I love what I do. So there's a problem. There's a problem.
This next question for Coach Christian. Unmute him. So, Coach, a couple of people have asked, and I sort of asked this question to Kim, but wanted to direct it to you. I asked this to Kim earlier, but with the Black Lives Matter movement and people tweeting and posting and doing things, what ways are you helping, student athletes find their own voice in speaking out on this issue?
Well, number one thing we're trying to do is really educate them. I think that's been a huge part of it. I mean, there's a reason why our students, all this stuff kind of goes into the same thing. Like, there's a reason why our Black students are coming in unprepared. It's all economic, so I want our guys to kind of understand just kind of how we got where we are. I think it's easy to look at where we are today and say, oh, we're just going to make it better today. And I think we should do that. But I think we need to look at the systems that are in place that have put us where we are right now. And I think that's important for our players to understand. We brought in a couple defense attorneys that work. One works in DC, one works in New York. And we wanted them to just talk about, the things that they see every day in the courtroom, to give them that kind of perspective. We're going to bring police officers in from DC and have them kind of talk, communicate with them, and give a platform for our players to ask us some questions. We have one of the best political schools in the country. Political science is huge here, so we're going to make sure we bring in people that can talk about voting and the importance of voting and what happens there. I'm just really committed to trying to use every bit of our resources to be able to do that and to create an environment and a platform with our team that we can talk about the hardest things to talk about. And I think that's just really important. I think a lot of these things we're talking about, from the ACT to the SAT to our students being underprivileged. I mean, if you really look at I would encourage you, look at the effects of redlining that affected our country years ago, that we're seeing those effects now. The reason that, African-American students aren't testing as well, because for years, several years, our schools have been underfunded. There's a reason why when I was at William & Mary or Bucknell, that we would go to certain high schools every single year, because those students would test better and they would do better and they'd be able to get into those schools. So redlining has been a major effect on the school systems. And that's why, when we get students that are seem to be better athletes in those communities, they haven't had the mentorship that other communities have had. They haven't seen the examples that people have been able to see that they can strive for. It's been systematically done. When you talk about the ACT and the SAT, if we've known for years that it's racially biased, then why are we still allowing it to be a measuring stick on who can get into the best schools in the country? It's unfair. If we've known this for years, it's racially biased. So to have that as a measuring stick of who can get into schools at Princeton, at Harvard, at GW, that's not fair. It's not fair to only do that for the student athletes and to not do that for the general student body. So I think, these are the challenges that I think we have to really try to fight for on college campuses, because it's just not fair. And I think so number one thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure I'm educating myself. I'm going to make sure when I'm on a platform, I have an opportunity to educate others. I agree with Gerald with academics being housed in athletics. It shouldn't be. It should be housed somewhere else. And so, when you look at all these issues, we've systematically pushed a segment of our population away and isolated them. And now we say, well, man, you're always isolating yourself. Well, I've been isolated. I've been isolated. And so like Kim, I felt the same way when I was at Mount St. Mary's. We're one of 2 or 3 Black guys in the class every time. So if you're looking like that at every college campus, that's a setting where you have a significant less number of people who can empower others, who can tackle the problems of today. That's been systematically done. And I think, everyone has to really fight to correct that. I think once you're educated, that it's wrong and what's out there, if you're a bystander to not trying to make this world better and make it more equal, then you're not helping the issue. So, I think when all the things we're talking about, it really comes back to economic necessity and, having a community of people that have really been starved out. And so as an athlete, if you're coming from a low income community, and you don't have anyone around you that's done anything more than made rap songs, or anyone that's done more than been an athlete, then that's what you say I have to become. You don't say I have to be an athlete and a lawyer. You don't say I have to be a police officer. You look at the most successful people in your communities, and that's who we emulate. And that's what's been done, through history and through time. And so I think until we have enough courage to really tackle those things, it won't change. And again, we're trying to use our platform with our team, and I'm trying to use the platform that I have to make sure we're educating people on those atrocities that are happening around our country.
Thanks, Coach. And now I want to give Tim a chance to talk. He put something in the chat, and obviously Gerald, and Coach Christian have said they believe academic support should be housed somewhere outside of the athletic department. Kim, you put something in the chat, and I want to give you a chance to elaborate. You mentioned athletes get treated for injuries not at the general student health clinic, but with their specialized athletic trainers, and they have there's just the reality for a student athlete on a campus is different than any other student because they have a full-time job in addition to being a student. So wanted to allow you to address why you feel so strongly that academics should be a part of the broader athletic department.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what this would look like in a universe with that being on campus. Are you hiring how many more staff? A lot of times in Kelly's space, there are people that have a extra something about them that they have I guess I'll use the word sympathy to work with a certain demographic of people, athletes or whatever. And there's an accountability that I just can't foresee happening if it happens in a general campus setting. Is that advisor going to report to the head coach to hold the student athlete accountable? Is this person someone of tenure who can't be fired and is just gonna, do this haphazardly? Is this an experiment that we're willing to deal with a student athlete failing and being deemed ineligible? I know my academic advisor, Tammy Chivas, she was at my wedding in wedding pictures. We still talk today. Athlete from Tulsa, from Colorado to here. There is a different level of accountability and I think understanding, and those people being people who understand athletics. Academics and athletics are not the same thing. And I'm almost done, Gerald, and you can go, but along, Daniel, with those student athletes having full-time jobs that most students don't, at the University of Tennessee, our football student athletes generated $82 million last season. So I think along with specialized athletic treatment with injuries, along with specialized places to eat, training, they deserve a little bit more special attention because I don't think these academic advisors in the Pac-12 are going to travel to UCLA, USC for a week when there's schools with travel partners. And there need to be tests proctored or whatever. But
Gerald, I'm going to give you a chance to respond, but I do want to add one thing just based on my experiences, at Vanderbilt, which is a high academic institution, and there's admission standards there, but you do see, I think, the academic experience, and especially as Coach Christian touched on it in terms of clustering. I mean, clustering was, I took a history of country music class that I was actually interested in the history of country music, but there was half of the population of that class was African-American student athletes who'd never heard a country music song before arriving on campus. And it's, what are they getting out of that? And I think, as part of this follow-up, Gerald, I want you, in terms of preparing, this was another question in the chat, preparing student athletes for a career outside of professional sports, is the way that the current system is set up in the NCAA and at these high-level Division I institutions, is it capable of doing that?
I have very little faith in the NCAA being capable of doing anything whatsoever. However, I did want to say that I am absolutely convinced that Kelly and Latonya are both extremely dedicated to their athletes, and they represent the very best in academic support. I have no doubt of that. But the fact is that the majority of NCAA Division I FBS institutions are supported by student fees. And so you sum up to 80 to 90% of the athletic department's budget. Now, granted, the University of Tennessee probably takes no student fees, but most schools do, even in the Power 5 conferences. And so you have a situation in which students are supporting the scholarships and the academic support systems and the operating budgets of the athletic department. And it seems only fair to me that the university's provost office, which generally has the responsibility for providing academic services to their students, ought to be in charge of academic support for student athletes as they are with every other type of student. There should be no differentiation at all. The fact of the matter is, if students are supporting the athletic program, they ought to be having the same services available to them that the athletes are having. Why should the athletes have a specialized unit of learning specialists to teach them study skills when in fact the general student body does not?
Well, a follow-up to that would be, I mean, you've mentioned the original sin of college athletics being these special admissions. And the majority of special admissions on a given campus are in the revenue sports, men's basketball and football. So let's say the University of Oklahoma has 50 special admits in the incoming freshman class, and 45 of those are between those, or 40 of those, let's say, are between those two sports and maybe baseball or women, revenue sports. And they, of those special admits, are clearly well underprepared for the academic rigors that they're going to face in college. So how do you, without giving them additional resources to get them up to speed, how do you combat the lack of readiness that they have coming into college?
More accurate figure is about 25 or so on a given year. Out of those 25, about 10% or 2 to 3 are reading below the 4th grade level, which is functional illiteracy. And most of now these are of the specially admitted athletes only. And most of the athletes are reading below the 9th grade level, which is the level in which college textbooks are written. So there is a great deal of work to do. At the University of Oklahoma, and again, I'm an advocate of this being outside of the athletic department, we had a reading center, we had a writing center, we had a mathematics center, a foreign language center, a mentoring center, all of which were designed to bring the athlete up to a competitive level. It takes about 18 months to take someone who has a severe reading problem to bring them up to a competitive level in college. It's not easy at all. Latonya and Kelly know this. The community colleges are specially well suited for working with students who need remediation. It's very difficult. And while you're trying to bring them up in those 18 months to a level that they can be competitive, the problem is that they're spending not 20 hours a week, but the various studies have shown between 40 to 60 hours per week during their season of competition. the athletes are essentially being brutalized on their time demands. So to expect an athlete to just breeze through school is not going to happen. And that's where these wonderful coaches that we have here on this panel come in, where they for first of all, they know who they're recruiting and they're paying special attention to who they're recruiting. But then once they're there, they're able to make sure that they get the kind of assistance that they need. Did that answer your question, Daniel?
Yeah, I'd like to let Coach Christian speak on this as well. You coach.
Thanks. I think the other thing that I think we know athletically, the guys that are special admins. I think the number that we don't know are the general student body who are special admins. And I think that's what's really unfair. I think we have a number with the athletes because we target that a little bit more. But I think the reality of it is if our schools are test optional, they have an ambiguity to let in who they want to let in. And I think that's a number that we should try to figure out what it is, as a higher ed. Again, we kind of know the athletes because we target them and we track them more than we do the general student body. And so I often think the general student body gets a little extra nudge here because we just don't know the statistics with that. And I do think that's unfair because I think, those centers that they have on those campuses, which I think our athletes should use, I think they're filled with a lot of students as well that are general student body students that needed that help coming in. And I think we just need to try to figure out what that number is because I do think that's unfair that we just don't know.
All right, Latonya she wants to chime in.
Just about being competitive, what I've realized, and even with my own son, a lot of advisors, or maybe it's the players, I don't know. I don't feel that they set athletes up for power and success with their majors. And that's a problem. My son was a student athlete, and his options were, and not saying that these are bad majors at all, people thrive in them if you get your master's or PhD, but just a regular bachelor's degree, there is no power and success in most of these fields. I think his options may have been criminology, social work, communication. And again, these are fine majors, but there's nothing like computers, STEM. And I feel that that's a problem too. When I spoke at a university in Georgia, and the department head of the advising area said that one student approached him and wanted to major in engineering. He was told he couldn't major in engineering because it would interfere with football. That's not fair. That's not fair for any student to have their dreams or hopes shot down because of football and have to take classes, humanities or liberal art classes, again, which are fine majors. But if they want to do something else, allow them to do something else and give them the support to do it. It's just not fair because my son, he could have majored in something else, but he was led in this direction, and that's it.
Thanks for that, Latonya. I want to add something, and then I'm going to let Kelly speak on this. But we actually, with the Bucks, interviewed a student athlete during draft prep this year who was an engineering major in college and as a freshman, and was told, got a new coaching staff his sophomore year, and was told, labs are going to interfere with practice time. And he wasn't explicitly told, don't pursue this engineering degree, but he was told basically don't pursue this engineering degree in as many words. And he was on the interview with us and was kind of lamenting the fact that he went to a STEM high school, was really interested in that field of study. And he basically said, I'm not interested in sociology, but it just doesn't interfere with practice. And for me and for our staff, it was just, because you hear these stories, and I had an experience. The first player I ever picked up for a draft workout went to the University of Memphis and was a high-level player there. And I said to him in the car, I was like, what did you major in? And his response was, what'd they call that shit again? Interdisciplinary studies. And he was in no way prepared for the real world. And, you know, he has had a career, he's bounced around overseas, but when he's done playing, he didn't learn anything. And Kim has mentioned this, and Coach Christian, he didn't learn anything in those 4 years that he got a free education that sets them up for the next 40 years of his life. So Kelly, I'll allow you to kind of speak on this topic. Let me unmute you.
Thanks, Daniel. A couple of things were thrown around that I'd like to hit on. The first one, it is difficult when you have a coaching staff that limits a student's opportunities with their majors. Specifically speaking, my head coach, Dan Muller, he does not limit, which is awesome for my students, for me helping my students. He will readjust practice. We will do what we can to find class times that fit within, but luckily we will do AM practices on Wednesdays if we have night classes, etc. So I think it's tough because it does fall on the coach to allow that and to set that standard for his team. Another thing that was talked about, the battle with having my particular office, whether that's on campus or in the athletic department, I think that's really tough. And I think that's it's a quality debate to have. And I think that what Coach Christian said, how we don't know the numbers of underprepared on campus. We truly don't. We don't know how packed those resources are. And so specifically speaking on my campus at Illinois State University, we do have programs that help FTIC, first time in college. So those, we call that the Visor Center. That is packed daily with general students. And so if I try to get one of my students who has a very time constrained schedule, every hour is etched out for them daily. If I try to get my students over to the general population tutoring center, I might not get them in. It's going to be a joint session. Odds are if there's more than one person, an additional student in there, they're going to lose focus. And so it's really tough to say that. It's just tough. And I think that we do provide specific resources to our students that they may just be overlooked if it was on campus. And so if I have a general appointment with one of my students for a reading tutor, writing tutor, economics tutor every night at 7, I need that time hit. I need a tutor to be available for my student because that is the only time that they have available for a tutor. And so again, we don't know the numbers on campus. We don't know the numbers of tutors provided, but at the end of the day, I know that my students who need the help will get the help, especially those that were specially admitted or underprepared or just need that extra help. But on the flip side, I think that our students are isolated. I think that they have a strong athletic identity because that's all that's been provided for them. I think Kim said it, or Coach Christian, I can't remember who was saying it, but you emulate what you see. You see these kids, they see professional basketball players, they see professional football players. That's all they want to be because that's what they see. And they have that strong athletic identity. However, we don't necessarily allow them time or the resources to go out on campus to see what it's like to be in a Black fraternity, because odds are if you're a student athlete, there's really no time for you to join a fraternity or a sorority. And so we don't really have the time etched in their schedules to go out and find a different identity. And so therefore they are sucked into the realm of the athletic identity. And that's a hard position to be in because as soon as school is over, as soon as their collegiate career is over, you're asking them to go into the real world, just go transition. And if they only have an athletic identity and their sport's done, they don't know what to do. And so it's just tough barriers all around, I think, for our student athletes. And I don't think there's a right answer, and we could debate, I think, on campus, I think in the athletic department, but at the end of the day, I know that I'm giving my students the best opportunities for help because I'm providing it for them.
So I'll ask a question to Coach Christian that just got put in the chat, and then I'll close with one final question that I want each of the panelists to touch on. So Coach Christian and Kim, I'll let you chime in on this as well. How do you feel about the recent talk of high-level players considering HBCUs? McCurmaker obviously committed to Howard University. And how can colleges bridge the cultural differences between the neighborhood student athletes grow up in and the college campuses that they're oftentimes coming to, which are predominantly white, predominantly not, if someone grows up in an inner city or in a rural school, they might only see white kids, or they might only see African-American kids because the schools are so segregated in our inner cities. So how do they bridge the cultural differences between the environment they grew up in and what they're experiencing on campus? Kim, I'll let you start, and then I'll go to you, Coach.
I am a huge proponent of our best, I'm going to speak basketball and football, of our best athletes going to HBCUs. I think it's a great idea. I think they should absolutely 1000% do it. So kind of two parts. I think it's just kidding. We can't be naive to say, oh, let's make everything equal when things weren't ever equal. The state of South Carolina was majority black from 1800 until 1960. To 1776 until 1960, there were more Africans and African Americans in the state of South Carolina than there were white people. There were 14 white colleges in the state of South Carolina that were created over that 200-year time span. There was one college for black people. In a majority black state, black citizens were funding white education and generating and creating white wealth. In our current system in high major athletics, football and basketball, these black student athletes in football and basketball are funding the athletic department, and they're also funding the education and excitement of white people. So I think they absolutely should go to Howard and Hampton and all these other great institutions and get them some TV contracts, get them some more donor support, get those people some more entertainment. And what we can do at predominantly white institution is things that we're talking right now. Engage in the community, actively recruiting, bold goals. I think it is this upcoming freshman class at the University of Tennessee, I think it's 156 black non-student athletes in a 8,000 student freshman class. Let's up that number by 600%. And it's done. The University of Tennessee, I'm a father of two daughters. They're Korean, white, and black. And I am so proud at the University of Tennessee and what we've done with empowering women in sport. I mean, it is our women head coaches, women administrators, sport administrators, professors, it's through the roof. We champion the cause of equality when it comes to gender. Let's make that step in making it when it comes to race relations as well.
Coach Christian?
Yeah, I love it. I mean, I think it's great for guys to go to HBCUs. I think you should go where you feel most comfortable. And I think one of the hardest things is that a lot of times, my parents both went to HBCUs. My mom went to Norfolk State. My dad went to Virginia State. So I grew up going to those games and going to those homecomings and being a part of that environment. And so I think it's great. I mean, I think it's great I think you go where you feel comfortable. And I think so. I'm a big fan of it. I'm kind of the thing I kind of struggle with. I'll talk to Kim about it some. I'm a big fan of it. The thing I think it's really interesting is that like the NBA guys now are coming out and saying guys should go to HBCUs, and I think that's interesting. But I'm like, well, they didn't go to HBCUs. Like, why didn't they go? And I think that's interesting. I think it's easy. Again, it's fashionable to wear the T-shirt and the shorts and to say, oh, you should do this. But when they had that opportunity, they didn't take that opportunity. Now, maybe they didn't take the opportunity because they weren't recruited there. There could be things like that. But I think we need people to do what they're asking other people to do, and to help out and to make sure that we're keeping that money within our community. So I think that's a huge thing. And I think the biggest thing community-wise is just to get out in the community and get outside of yourself. I think we should all do that. Again, we have our leadership enhancement plan. I'm a big proponent for that. And, we're doing more community service every year than we've ever done. In our athletic department, we had awards that rewarded people for community service. And we almost win that almost every single year, because I'm just a big believer in that. White, black, whatever, we should get out in our communities and we should help. Again, we are the example that kids around the country are looking at. So why would we just play basketball or play football? Why wouldn't we go out and try to interact and try to get to know and like really do community service, like really spend time, not just do the shop with the Rams or go to the hospital and take the picture, like do real community service. Like, you're going to start a tutoring program, man, that's a great idea. That's something that we should be trying to partner with. We have smart athletes. We should be partnering and finding things like that we can do within our communities. You think about this, right now, this is going to be one of the hardest academic times in our country's history. You're looking at homeschooling, online learning, and so there are going to be two classes of people that are going to be undereducated at the highest level because they don't have the resources. They don't have computers. We don't have internet. They don't have the resources to be successful. So that's going to set us back. And while the people that have the resources are going to continue to improve themselves. So unless, if you have the resources, you're not finding programs within the inner city or within programs that need it, and you're not buying and donating computers and software for them, then you're not helping either. Right? And that's going to be two classes. You think about that. That's a lot of people that will be affected by this that no one's accounting for right now. So whether it's reading or writing or tutoring, I mean, these programs become very important right now. Again, it's two classes right now. If this goes longer, it could be 3 classes of underprivileged people not becoming educated and missing the mark. Gerald's talking about people coming in at the 6th grade level. Well, what if they miss those 3 years? Where are they going to be? So, I think educational programming is extremely important right now that no one's really talking about. And so, we're going to continue to try to hunt out programs that we can partner with in our community that we can try to make an impact there.
And I want to add, you asked the question, Coach, about why didn't NBA players, go to HBCU, and through my experiences and talking to people, and I think there is a general sense, and Kelly has touched on this, and Latonya, like Kim said, every player, what's your goal? I want to make the NBA. I want to get to the NBA. I want to get to the NBA. And they're like a single track mind of getting to the NBA, whatever they think that entails. So they see, okay, Kentucky has produced a graphic that has 20 NBA draft picks in the last 10 years. And they're going to say, if I want to get to the NBA, I need to go to Kentucky or I need to go to Washington. And I think that players, Keith Wright is a friend of mine. He was a player at Harvard, was Tommy Amaker's first recruit at Harvard. And he was getting recruited by some schools that were more traditional basketball schools. And he told me, Coach Amaker told me what he sold Keith on was do something that's never been done before. Make Harvard basketball. Harvard is a university that's renowned for everything else other than their basketball program. So make Harvard basketball be something that the university can be proud of in the same way. And that's a message that resonated with Keith. And I think, now you see it's kind of the HBCU thing is, in place, but there's obviously so many other elements of, they don't have the resources recruiting to recruit kids that, high major schools do. And I think, and people are going to see how Maker does at Howard, because if he goes there and isn't a first round draft pick, then I think this trend of going to HBCUs could be a one and done thing, because players are going to be told, oh, if you go there, look at what happened to him, or you go to an Ivy League school, you're not going to get drafted. I mean, there was an Ivy League player drafted last year, Mie Oni, and I think these things are possible. If you're a good enough basketball player, you guys know this, you're going to find them, whether they're in Finland or Knoxville, Tennessee, or Weber State University. But I think there's so much what they've seen and defined as success, and going to a high major and being a one and done and leaving, school early because now there's this kind of, oh, if you're too old to be in the NBA and you don't have upside. I mean, we took a player who was 23 years old, Malcolm Brogdon, who was a master's degree in public policy from the University of Virginia, and he was the rookie of the year and now is playing on an $85 million contract. So it can be done. I think it's just you have to find, like you said, the individuals that are willing to take that chance. And also you have to show them that these positive examples outside of just these players that go to these traditional powers can do the things that you want to do while also getting the benefits educationally that will provide them for the next 40 years of their life. So the last question I want to ask each of you, and I'll start with Coach Henderson, is, I mean, the reality is NCAA athletics is a big money business. You're seeing it right now on college campuses where they're saying the student body is not going to be allowed to come back to the dorms, but you have athletes on campus right now doing voluntary workouts, and they're going to be based in the city. So with the current structure in place that depends so much on the revenue that athletics generates, particularly at Power 5 schools, is there a way to make like academics as important? Like, is there ever going to be a way to balance the equation where it's a 50-50 athletic and education as opposed to what it is on so many places where it's an 80-20, given the current financial realities of the NCAA? And I'll start with Coach Henderson on this one. And I'll unmute you again, Coach.
I'm probably not, I have an opinion, but, at our school, we're obviously, we're Division I AA football. And we've already canceled fall sports. So the conversations that we're having around our institution are about, which students need to come back to campus. And I'm not going to really answer your question, but I think that the running back from Illinois recently, I saw today, said he wasn't going to play. And my sense is that on these campuses with football, that they're going to persist. That's sort of the impression I get, but I don't know, Daniel. I don't know how. I guess your question is about how do we encourage? I didn't totally follow. How do we encourage students?
How can there be a better balance between student athletes who are going to these universities and producing so much income and a dependence on the university's bottom line? How can there be a balance in reinvesting some of that money into their educational experience as opposed to just sort of clustering them? And with the amount of money involved, is that something that's even attainable in the current model?
Well, I think I think the main thing here is that we've got to make sure that that we keep in mind what we're doing this for. So this is you have 5 years to complete 4 years of eligibility. We have a massive crisis where sports are getting upended, and largely, especially for men's basketball, it's and this is getting back to the testing. We have a very unequal playing field in which to get our student athletes through 4 years of college. And there's major inequities in the process as it relates. Somebody pointed out that we're still in Ivy League athletics. You have to have a test score in order to be admitted. There's a lot of the sports, Daniel, at our school here at Princeton that are all white sports. Coach, and we haven't had an African American or any other race for that matter in that sport for years. So large group of the kids that we are currently recruiting need to retest. So I think there's a major inequity at all different levels. Maybe the high major level, but also here for student athletes that are looking to get into an Ivy League school. And these are things that need to be addressed. I think maybe Jamion or maybe said it earlier, it's a really unfair, and it is, it's important and time to be very loud right now.
Gerald, I'll go to you next.
Okay. I think that we need to realize that the United States is the only country in the world who admits athletes not for their ability to be a student, but to be an entertainer. And as long as that formula exists, athletes are going to be cheated out of a real education. We really need to revisit what the NCAA has done. College presidents need to get control of academic integrity on their institutions and within the rules of the NCAA, or do away with the NCAA altogether. Because when you really examine this, it doesn't make much educational sense. It's not logical, and it should be. After all, higher education has a mission, and that is to provide education to the citizenry. That's their most important mission, and we have failed at that. And the athletes get the short end of the deal. They are being cheated out of an education. And while I know that we all try hard enough, Daniel, you're from Vanderbilt. The athletic department at Vanderbilt is not in the athletic department. It's in student affairs. Gordon Gee moved athletics out of athletics. And that should tell you something. It tells you that a university should be about education first and foremost, entertainment second. That's all I have to say.
He did that, but they're still willing to collect the $40 million check from the SEC.
Right, I know.
Kelly, I'll let you speak on this next.
I guess so, Daniel, I'm trying to understand exactly what you're asking.
So essentially, you know, the money involved in college athletics has gotten so outsized. Mm-hmm. And the universities depend so much on these student athletes to generate that revenue. Is there any way under the current economic model where the balance between the investment in athletics, I mean, you see the University of Alabama spending millions of dollars on a new locker room with flat screen TVs, but they're not spending that millions of dollars investing in the education of their football players who are going there to presumably get an education. And a lot of them go on to the NFL and do great things, but is there a way to invest in education, use those resources in athletics to reinvest into the education for athletics, or has it become so one-sided of athletics, facilities, everything else to be brought back to somewhat of a normalcy?
Yeah. When you word it like that, I have a different opinion. So I think we're still waiting for someone to be that first person that does take the money instead of putting it into a locker room, into cool recruiting tools. I think we're waiting for someone to turn around and put it into an awesome academic program, or maybe it has happened and we're just not aware of it, or I'm not aware of it. You know, I worked at Florida State for 2 years. I was there 2013 to the beginning of 2015, national championship years. And it's become a mini business, right? In some regards, they're there, you can say, to play their sport. And it's really challenging, specifically when they have coach's focus is a national championship. Their job is on the line for a national championship. Even if they go to a bowl game, that's not good enough in some boosters, donors' eyes, right? And so it's hard to navigate the waters of, yes, they are there for an education, but is that really the message that's going out, right? And so it's a challenging question because I don't have an answer, and I don't know who really does have the right answer, but our student athletes, you can say they're getting cheated out of an education, but it is on them to take the opportunity. But it's also about that community I spoke about earlier. It's about having those coaches that are a true proponent of the education. It's about having the support staff that are true proponents of the education. that will focus on splitting the balance. You are here for your academics, but you're also here for your sport, and we will teach you the balance and the life skills to be able to be successful in both. And so I don't know if I answered your question, but I know that it has shifted towards more of a mini semi-professional situation, right? And I think that's all about what you can do to build bigger and better to recruit the best and the very best. And so, Daniel, I don't know if I answered your question at all, but it is a topic of interest for sure.
Kim, I'll let you speak on it next. Oh, hold on, Kim. I got to unmute you.
Sorry.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I'm not sure I have the answer either. I guess I'm moved to think what Gerald said about college sports in America, and that's true. As someone that's lived internationally, college sports aren't a thing in Italy or France or South America. But I'd say that's more a problem with America than it is college athletics. I think capitalism drives it. And you said it should be about higher education or education and entertainment second. I think money has a lot to do with it. And that's obvious with the college bribery scandal, which plagued us a year or two ago, where people committed federal crimes. So yeah, I don't know. I don't think it's fair to say athletes are cheated out of an education. I don't think it's used to the fullest extent, but me, a self-proclaimed person that did not take full advantage of all it could have been, me being in that environment for 4 years allowed me to gain the knowledge, gain the relationships, to make me break a cycle of poverty in my family. And like Jamion said earlier, I learned in sociology of the family study or population studies in college. Me going to college, my wife going to college make my kids 92% more likely to go to college or whatever it is. It's not all bad. It's not all bad. It's a lot of good, and it is an outlet. It is an outlet for a lot of people, a lot of poor people, a lot of minorities in the country.
Thanks, Kim. Latonya, I'll go to you next.
Again, I'm about like everyone else with the question.
All right, I'm about to go.
Wants to make with all the money that colleges receive, even from JUCOs, they receive a lot of money. What I would suggest to do to keep a balanced playing field, pay the college athletes. Ooh, did I say that aloud? Pay them. When you graduate, you will receive a check for the time, the blood, sweat, and tears, for everything that you've done to this university, for all the money you have raised or for this school, being on that field, being on that court, you all deserve a paycheck. Balance it out that way. That will help the underrepresented. That would help at-risk kids. That will help first-generational students. Pay them. If you're getting all this money, pay them. And also another thing that colleges should do is, and I know they have a lot of classes on campus or offered to students, it should be more diverse. They should have more diverse classes on campus that a lot of athletes and anyone else can relate to. And being an educator, it would not be fair if I wasn't culturally sound and aware of all ethnicities around me and was able to read others' writing. If I wasn't able to watch movies by everyone. You have to connect. You have to be a diverse individual. And if you're not, it will never be balanced. So and the question is, or a few questions are, when was the last time you watched a person of color movie? When was the last time you watched a person of color, and I'm not watched, read, book, or anything, watched a speech? When was the last time you did anything, supported a person of color business? If you haven't, then it will never be an even playing field. So that's one way as an educator that you have to be tuned in with diversity. If not, that's a problem.
Thank you for that. And Coach Christian, I will let you have the closing statement.
I think, again, we get a chance to determine what our environments look like as coaches, as administrators. I mean, I put a lot of responsibility on ourselves. The first time a guy comes to you and he says he wants to major in something and you tell him to take another class because of practice, you're part of the problem. All I've tried to do and try to control is just the environment we're trying to create for our guys to have that freedom to become who they want to be. I think we have a lot of resources on campuses that can help all our students, especially our student athletes, if we have a great focus on that. If we make it, like, we can make it about education. We can make it about education. I've sat we had a guy in this class for a week. I sat him out of practice for 3 weeks. I've done that. He was one of my better players by the end of the year because that was more about his life than it was about him playing basketball. I don't know if a lot of guys are willing to do that, but I'm willing to do that. And I think because I'm willing to go to that extent with it, I think our guys have a tendency to try to do better in class. If you come in and you have a C-, if you have a C and you're a guy that can get an A in the class or a B in the class, I'm going to be extremely disappointed in you. We have a chance to create this environment. I think we make it a ton about winning and losing, and I think there's a place for that. I just don't want to have that place in someone's life. And I think when you sign up for this as an educator, you're trying to affect lives, you're trying to change the way people see the world, the way they're educated. I think we have a choice on that, and we just need more people to make what I think is the right choice. The right choice isn't to sacrifice them not being at their best in the classroom or with people just because we got another win on Saturday. I think we have to try to help. We have to use that resource if they want to give them what they need most. Like I'm sure we do as a parent, we do that often. You just have to, sometimes you have to stand up and your kid's going to be pounding on the floor and pouting, but you're doing it for what's best for them. We just try to be the program that does that. And, I'm hoping that more people will do that, because us choosing winning and losing consistently or making money consistently over truly impacting our student athletes has had a dramatic effect on us. And I think we have to make that decision, that conscious decision, day in and day out.
Thanks, Coach. And I want to thank everyone for being a part of it. I really enjoyed the discussion among the panelists, especially at the end, and I thought we had some great questions from the audience. So to our panelists, thanks for taking the time, and to everyone else, thanks for being here. And we'll have everyone's emails, so I'll email out a recording of this to all the participants, and potentially do something like this again, but hope it was beneficial for all involved. So thanks everyone for participating.
Stay healthy.
Yes, you too, Gerald.
Take care.